Hello, and welcome to She Leads Biotech, the podcast that celebrates women leaders in the bioscience space. I'm your host, Sharon Cox, CEO and Managing Director of CNA International, based right here in New York. And each week I'll be talking to women leaders about their work, their triumphs and challenges, providing invaluable insight into how women can unlock their superpowers and succeed on their own terms. So whether you're navigating your own career path in bioscience or you're passionate about science and innovation, I hope you're empowered and inspired by each episode. Some guests come to this show with one clear through line, a straight path from academia to biotech leadership. Today's guest isn't one of them, and that's exactly what makes her story so powerful. From early scientific curiosity and bench work in molecular biology to a brief detour in software at Oracle, she's navigated a career defined by curiosity, adaptability, and vision. She's worked in big pharma, medtech, venture capital, and early-stage biotech. She's raised capital, launched products, survived setbacks, and turned advisory gigs into transformational strategic roles. And along the way, she's learned how to tell the story behind the science, an underrated superpower in a world where the best ideas often fail to land. Now, she's doing something that sounds both revolutionary and practical, using the power of drug repurposing and nature-based combinations to bring affordable, accessible therapies to underserved populations. At a time when traditional VCs still chase shiny platforms, she's focused on tangible progress, rooted in smart clinical efficiency and market access equity. So joining me today from her home in Denver, Colorado, please welcome founder and CEO of IleraBio, Rhonda Wallen.
Rhonda, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Sharon. Nice to be here.
It's lovely to have you here. Where are you speaking from?
I'm in Denver, Colorado.
I've heard such lovely things about. I've never been to Colorado, but I've heard such lovely things about that. Well, that's it. I take that as an invite. I'm on my way. Have you always been there? Are you a Coloradian native? Is that the right way to say it?
Coloradan is what we say. And I cannot claim nativity. I moved here from the Bay Area.
Oh, okay.
A little over 20 years ago. And so it's close enough. I mean, it's a long time, longer than a lot of folks.
Yeah, close enough. That's good. Well, I'm talking to you from sunny actually it's sweltering New York City at the moment, so it's not really, well, it is still sunny, but it's sweltering. And so lovely to meet you. Welcome to the show. And I want to dive straight in because there's so much that I actually want to talk to you about. You've built a diverse career around startups, boardrooms, advisory roles. What originally drew you to the biotech or bioscience space, and how has your why evolved over that?
Yeah, great question. Well, my why hasn't evolved. It's always been, I want to be involved in the process of creating new therapies for patients. That was the impetus since high school. And what it was relating to for me was science. And I was always a science nerd, and I really have this almost insatiable curiosity to understand how things work. And it started very early. My dad was an attorney, but he also did some real estate, and he would take me on these tours with him, which was just looking at land. It was not, developed housing. So we would walk these properties, and I would look at all the different trees and the grasses and rocks and everything that was there. And it was really fascinating to me, all the diversity that you could see in Mother Nature. And I just was always thinking, like, how did all this stuff come to be here? And how do these tiny little pine cones grow into these giant conifers? And how does this all work? And so that was the basis for my scientific curiosity. And then when I was applying to colleges, I did have to further define that why. And I knew, especially having a family member that had very serious asthma and seeing him in the hospital a couple of times, I wanted to understand, like, how do these drugs help people live better lives? How do they help people get better from whatever it is they're suffering from? And science can help answer those questions.
So how did your career progress? I know that you've got a biotech,
BS in biology, MS in microbiology.
microbiology, and you've also got an MBA as well.
Correct.
You little studious person, you. Oh, well done. So what was your first foray into work, and how did your career grow during that time?
So I started in the lab as most scientists do, and learned about sequencing, about cloning, about DNA plasmid preps and running gels and how to understand what was going on at the molecular level. Did some tissue culture, which helps you understand what's going on at the cellular level. And then realized at that point, and I was being recruited to be a graduate student, that I had to think seriously about, do I want to spend the next 7 years of my life in the laboratory doing really interesting work? But what I noticed was two things. Not only can it be very isolating because it's just you and your petri dishes often for hours at a time, but it's also a little bit frustrating for people who like to get the answers, right? I'm a little impatient. And every time I would get an answer, it would just beg like 5 more questions. So, we were looking at how different cell lines transitioned and changed their phenotype from, for example, fat to muscle. And we would treat them with these different growth factors and cytokines. And sometimes we'd get these results and be like, oh no, well, that means we've got to go do all these other experiments, right? So just getting the translation from the research to the clinic just took a very, very long time. And I wasn't prepared to put in that amount of, I guess, single-minded dedication to answering scientific questions. And that's really what you have to have.
Yeah. And I've spoken to so many people that kind of made that transition from the bench, and that's always been their reason. It's just I want to cure cancer now, or I want to do such and such now. And yet there are those people. Thank the Lord that there are those people that just have that dedication to just see this whole thing through to the end. So the two together is the perfect match, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's really good to kind of know where your strengths are, right? So I knew my strengths were a bit more outward facing, and I really wanted to be involved in not only the decision making, but the bigger picture, and interacting with all the other folks who are necessary when they come together to bring all of this to fruition. And so, yeah, I made my transition from the lab. I took a little detour through the software industry because Oracle was hiring like crazy. And that was my way out of the lab. It was, they were looking for just young people that were go-getters. And I said, hey, I help you understand the pharmaceutical world. And I'm sure they all use databases. And they're like, great, come on over. So I had a little detour in software, sat down from Larry Ellison and Mark Benioff for a little while. So that was good. And then I realized I needed to get back to the meat of what I love in drug development.
You spent some time doing venture capitalist, didn't you? Do finance initially. What is that? Again, I speak to so many people who start off as venture capitalists or PhDs, or they do the masters in whatever they want to do within bioscience, and then they're recruited by Wall Street or the equivalent, and they are then in the cutting edge of dishing out money to people, which is fantastic, and shame not so much going on right now, but there you go. How did you fit into that? How did that work for you?
Yeah. So after business school, I was able to get some business development positions. One was in biopharma, which is, very large, established pharmaceutical company. Then I did that same role for a med tech company where my team was responsible for the market's second drug delivery stent. And so because of that, we got bought by Boston Scientific, and because I had both laboratory, biotech and pharma and med tech experience. Then I was recruited to be a VC investor. So that's how I got there. My firm was not specialized in life sciences. We had about a third of our fund life sciences. And so we looked very broadly in deals. So they just wanted somebody with a broad-based background. So I fit the bill. So I did that for a few years. We had a big exit when we sold one of our companies to Gilead after they had a successful IPO. All my partners retired. I was not a partner. I was very, very junior at the time. So they basically retired. I went on to start my first biotech company, which was a spin out of the University of Colorado. So my first startup was a spin out of the University of Colorado. And I had built a relationship there because a lot of our investments were also related to the university or had university founders or other connections. I actually spent a little time in their tech transfer office helping them to kind of rationalize their IP portfolio and see, what's a product, what's a company, what should we spend more money on, and what's super interesting, but is just another way to solve a problem that many other people have solved. And in that process, I discovered this really interesting collection of IP from my co-founder, who became my co-founder, Doug Graham, who was a pediatric oncologist. And he had a set of assets that were related to a particular area of biology that was really very focused in and lymphomas, particularly of the childhood type, as well as glioblastomas. So we started the company, negotiated 3 agreements with the university in less than a month. All went very well. I raised some seed capital, and we're off to the races. We wrote a lot of grants. I helped refine how we focused our R&D so that we could build that data package that would be compelling for investors and for pharma companies, potential partners. And then we were going out for our Series A, 2008. And that was not a good time. That was arguably the worst, or maybe the second worst, depending on how it compares to today. Uh, I have impeccable timing here, right? So, anyway, we made some good progress, and I could not afford to just feed my family based on grant income, and so had to step away and had some other corporate roles after that. But my co-founder stuck with it, and when you're in the academic setting, it's expected that you write and live off your grants. So he was able to keep the research going and pivoted to a small molecule. Fast forward 7 years, 8 years, and it just finished phase 1 last.
Oh, wow. And how did you feel coming away from it? Obviously, you had to make a decision. How did that make you feel?
I think as women, we probably are a little bit harder on ourselves, and I took it as a failure. But there are so many people that have that identical experience, and sometimes those with the Y chromosome are like, "Okay, that's it, on to the next thing." But I was like, "Oh my gosh," you know, but it was a great experience, right? I mean, we actually had a reagent product line that we launched. We had international distribution. It was a fantastic experience, and I didn't want to step away, but there's only so much you can do on grant funding, and biotech is expensive. You need that institutional capital to really scale and take things to the next level.
Yeah.
So it did allow me the opportunity to go ahead and join some other ventures. I joined Biodesics, which is a proteomics oncology company. A lot of overlap with what I was doing before, including sharing a scientific advisory board member. So, it's a small community, and that enabled me to be part of commercial operations and launching a new biotech product. And they ended up going public. So that was great to be a part of that story. Then I went on to head up corporate development at Terumo's BCT division, which is here in Colorado. did a couple of strategic transactions for them. One was the largest in the division's history and raised up 2 new lines of business for them. And yeah, so, you build on whatever experiences you have, whether or not they are construed in your mind or other people's minds as failures. I remember I was talking to this one VC trying to raise money during, it was 2009 at the time. And he really grilled me. He's like, well, what have you all done? What have you had any exits before? Have you made money for investors before? It just put me through the ringer. And, it's not great for your self-esteem, but I had to tell myself, look, well, this is what I have done. And I know one of the things we wanted to touch on is challenges for women. Well, I'll tell you that the bar is higher. And especially if you're a minority woman, you get really, really, you're just questioned quite a bit, right? And you have to kind of prove that you deserve to be in the room. But there was a
More though, that's the,
even more.
it's not a question of proving, because we all have to prove something at some point to somebody, but to actually have to prove more. I've spoken to numerous women who've been in the situation of looking for funding and have been grilled, like even to the point, well, how will it affect your family life if you've got to do such and such? And, the guy walks in the room and he's at, hey, let's have a chat about, oh, yeah, no, that sounds great. There's no mention of any things like that, which I always think is unfair, but life's unfair. So
That's right. You kind of, you have to take it, right?
yeah.
This is the world we're born into. And by the way, there are academic studies that have shown this. The data is just, it's very, very clear that there is a double standard.
Yeah.
So, this is the world we live in. And it just, what I think is, as women, it just makes us have to be even stronger and even more compelling.
And I think that failure aspect makes us stronger as well.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, again, anybody who says to me, oh, I've never really failed at anything. Well, then you've never achieved anything. You
haven't really put yourself out there then. Yeah.
You're in a nice little safe box somewhere doing something safe because, failure has to happen. I know for myself, I had a nice job, a good career in the UK, could pretty much ride out till retirement if I'd chosen to. But I had this burning desire to live in the US and particularly in New York. My way of doing that was to get my own business. I arrived here with no clients, no business, no contacts, no idea what the market was like.
But a lot of chutzpah, right?
And that's like what it takes. Yeah, you just gotta. And and there were times when I was literally counting how many months have I got left before I run out of money, and I don't have, and things I tried didn't work, and things that worked, I wasn't expecting them to work. But it really gives you. And so now, where we're in this challenging time, I'm a bit like, okay, we'll come through.
Well, we'll figure it out.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, we'll figure it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what about your board, your advisory roles and things like, how did you get involved in that? And what's the role that you play in that?
Yeah. So, I think advisory roles have come mostly through word of mouth and relationships that I have in the industry when people know that there is a scientific founder who could use help. Because part of my superpowers are really understanding how to communicate complex topics to the lay audience or more specifically to the investor audience. And that's one of the things I do well. So when there are people who have very interesting and compelling technologies, but are not sure how to communicate what's compelling about it in a way that is compelling, then they'll call me. They're like, you know what, go talk to Rhonda. She'll help hear us out. Yeah. And it just sort of evolved from there. I had several kind of advisory consulting roles that turned into full-time roles because amusingly, when I would say, okay, well, before we do all of this, we need to set our strategy. What is your go-to-market? And I would hear crickets to be like, okay, well, let's think about, we really want to accomplish and why. right? Why is this the best first thing we should do with this technology? So, and from there, for example, there was one of my clients, we decided the best first thing that they could do is demonstrate this particular device application in a topical application, but they didn't have any clinical data. They had a 510K, but they hadn't designed the trial that would help to drive the adoption of this technology with physicians. And so I helped them design the trial, and then they didn't have anyone to run it, and they weren't sure how to run it. So I hired some CRAs and, I helped train the physicians. And so, you just end up sort of filling in where you help people to identify that there is a need that needs filling in.
And how do you balance that kind of speed and agility with governance and long-term vision, particularly when you're advising those early stage founders?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the long-term vision is really key in those early interactions because you want to help communicate that you understand. You understand their why. You understand that they have put, oftentimes half, if not their life's work and all their research work and focus into this technology area.
Yep.
So you always have that as kind of your North Star. It's like you did this because you wanted to help patients, right? And then you balance that with, okay, we've got to get there in a stepwise fashion. The very first thing we need is to define that compelling application that the investors will sign up for. And then once you define that, then you kind of peel that back a little bit further to say, okay, now we need this data, right? This data will support that application and will get people very excited and help them see the bigger picture and the ultimate potential.
And that's what helps you then move forward with the funding because you're creating the story, right? The science is there, and that's great. Science is fantastic. What I've learned, investors want to see what's the story, what's the hook, what's going to grab me, that's going to make me want to invest in this. A little bit like a movie script, I guess, isn't it? What's the plot and what's it going to do as to how much I'm going to put into it.
Exactly. Storytelling is a huge part of it. And you have to help them see the vision and the big picture and build that excitement with them. And in some cases, the FOMO, right? It's like, hey, this is where the future is. You do not want to miss out on this, right? Which is why it's challenging for me right now, fundraising for my company. It's really great technology, and I think there's a real big need to look at natural compounds in addition to pharmaceutical compounds, which is part of what we're doing.
I was good all right now. He beat me to it.
Well, yeah. So, the board and advisory work, I actually stepped back from that when I met my co-founder of my new company. And the genesis for this was I kind of was bouncing some ideas off some other scientists and executives of color post George Floyd, post COVID about, there are these healthcare disparities, but we're all in drug development, life sciences. How do we participate in a movement that is trying to address this? And so came up with a strategy around, what can biotech do here? And it's really about the assets we choose to develop, how we choose to develop them, meaning how we do our clinical trials, how we ensure diversity and applicability of what we're doing to broad populations. And finally, how we tackle market access. And if we can do that earlier on with both CMS and the individual Medicaid organizations at the state level, then that will make sure that we have a smoother on-ramp to serve all populations and not just people with great health insurance.
Right.
So this was a great plan, but the plan is nothing without the fundamental assets underlying it. So it was on the shelf. I had a couple of executive roles. I was doing board work. And then I met my co-founder, and he is one of the premier metabolic scientists and physicians, endocrinologists. And he has just a lot of intellectual property in this area. And he was very much aligned in terms of wanting to serve underserved populations, wanting to create therapies that are very accessible and affordable. And so I started looking through what he had, and he has this really unique way of not only looking at older drugs and understanding where they can now be used and repurposed, but also how does nature help you make those drugs better? And so I was fascinated by this approach. And yeah, we founded the company based on some assets that he had. And so getting back to where I entered this, what we're doing is extremely practical. It's very economical because you are saving time in clinical development, and time is money, as you know. You're saving time because you can rely on existing safety data, production data, pharmacokinetics. Like, we know a lot about these drugs. That's why drug repurposing makes a ton of sense. But the investment community is like, meh. It's not sexy. It's not like the whiz bang, Casper, Chris9, all these new platforms that are out there, which, by the way, takes forever to get a lead compound, but hey,
Yep.
they're still sexy. So that's been a challenge for us is how do you convey that excitement about what we're doing, even though there isn't a specific patent covering the composition of matter of one molecule, right? These are not new molecules. We have IP around different new combinations, formulations, methods of use, but it's been a challenge to get the institutional community to get behind this approach.
Is what you're doing along the lines of what every cure is doing?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought them up. So that's, I think,
I love that guy.
yeah.
I met David at Bio last year, and we did the sign, and he was just his story is so fascinating, and it just amazes me. But it seems to somebody like me who knows nothing really about science, it just makes so much sense that there's so many drugs out there that have already been approved for certain things, and just by mixing something or doing things with could create a whole new.
Yes.
See, that to me is really sexy and really like.
I'm glad you think so. I will send you our plan and just get your checkbook out, okay?
Yeah, I could do $2.50, and that'll help. I think it's really great, but
Yeah. So I'm so
you're
pleased.
with them.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up because I think every cure is and people like every cure who are using AI to kind of sift through the mountains of data that we have for all of these existing drugs. I think the fact that they're getting traction is very promising. The NIH has or had up until very recently, I have to check and see if it's still there, but they had a whole division called NCATS devoted to looking at repurposing drugs. So this is an area that has interest, but I think, the thing to note about every cure is they are a nonprofit, right? And so I think they're still going to have a challenge figuring out their business model. Drug repurposing companies that are using AI are not positioning themselves as drug development. They are positioning themselves as AI. And that's one of the reasons they get funding. But still, when they find those compounds or that data that can create new IP, and note everyone, that new IP is not around the composition of matter. It is around new uses and new methods or new formulations. When they find that, they still have to find a buyer, right? They still have to find cash to develop it. And, so far, all the companies that have taken the drug repurposing route, and like Dare and Sabrina Johnson.
Yep.
Yeah. Our model is very much like hers, right? And she ended up doing a reverse merger to get onto the market to get that institutional capital in because the traditional VCs were just like repurposing drugs, women's health, so we're in a very similar situation. So I'm watching with great interest all these people who are now AI drug discovery to see for those of them who are looking at repurposed drugs or who find these repurposed drugs, what comes next for them, right?
And because when I first encountered Every Cure, one of the things that they were actively looking for were companies that had data around the drugs and we'll share your data with us that we can help you to get it back and give it back to you. It didn't seem as if it was, give us your data and we'll just take it and do stuff with it. It was, share your data with us, tell us where you've got, and look at how we can help you get to the next stage. Is that the model that, because that's how I read the model that they were looking to do.
Yeah, I think that is what they're doing. And I think that's very useful as a service business for pharma, right? So by and large, they're not going to be talking to startups or trying to form startups around any new IP that they're discovering or that has the potential to be generated based on their findings. So that's a little bit different than a startup saying, we have a brand new formulation of this old drug, help us get it on the market.
Right. Okay. That makes complete sense. And what are your long-term plans with, obviously you've got your co-founder now, and there's obviously a real kind of synergy there. Is this take this as far as you think you can, or are there other areas that you need to consider too?
So we are going to try and develop the first product, again, take it in a stepwise fashion. We kind of floated the idea of all the assets as a combination to some friendly investors that I know since I came from that world a while ago, and got the feedback that, probably the most interesting asset is your women's health asset. So decided to focus on that. And because of the environment that we're in, really skinny down the plan just to focus on hitting the clinical milestones with that in particular program, raising the least amount that we can get away with to advance that, and building the value of the company in a stepwise fashion. So we're not particularly interested in trying to flip it right away. Although one of the things that I do tell our potential investors, especially the angel investing community, that doesn't want to wait 10 years to exit, right? And you don't want them to be afraid to invest in life sciences because of that long time horizon. One of the things we do communicate is that we can do these deals with pharma or specialty pharma, branded generics, whoever the larger company is that wants to take our drug to market, co-market, or take them into new regions of the world. We will have some upfront money from those deals, and we can use that upfront money to exit our investors. I mean, if we were looking at our obesity candidate, the deals that have been done in obesity, albeit around new molecules, but still they're all chasing the GLP-1 market, right? And most of them, if not, okay. Yeah. And I mean, most of them, if not all of them, are just Me Too's for these GLP-1s. So if you chase after that, then that's going to be, it could be lucrative. If you look at the deals that have been done, it's just amazing to me that even though it's a crowded market, the deal size is large. I mean, there was like $12 billion worth of deals done in this space in the last 18 months. And so if we find someone who is okay being not a Me Too to the GLP-1s, but being an alternative to the GLP-1s, we could strike a potentially very lucrative deal. And we can use the money from that deal to provide an exit for our investors. It's a little bit of a different model, but it's been done.
And it will be done again. I just sense it. I don't know, Rhonda, there's something that's coming out of the screen at me with you that is like, we're going to make this happen. A question I have, if you had a magic wand to remove one barrier in the life science industry, what would it be?
It would be giving the institutional investors a broader vision of what success looks like. Right now, everyone has a very narrow definition of how a return can be made. And I think there are many ways for companies to be successful. And of course, I'm talking about a lot of the companies like us who are looking at the repurposed drug world. Many of them have IPO'd, right? That's a great exit for investors. Now, market conditions will determine whether or not you can maintain your value post-IPO. That's a different story. But the IPO route is a fine route for exiting those investments. And I just wish more institutional investors would be comfortable with that, as opposed to assuming everything needs to be sold to a pharma company to exit.
Yeah, it's still relying on the same, that's the way it's been. And so that's the way it's going to be. It's almost like it needs somebody to just break the mold, really, and say, well, like that other BA, or there are other now that let's find another way. Well, I have to say, I can't believe where the time has gone. I've just been fascinating talking to you. And there's just one more question I want to ask you before I let you go, because the premise behind She Leads Biotech is spotlighting people behind the progress. And you've clearly been involved in that. What is something that's unexpected or surprising about your journey that's shaped who you are today?
Well, I think it's the fact that I've had a lot of different roles in a lot of different therapeutic spaces. So I haven't just stayed in one particular area. And I guess what's surprising to me is how useful all of it has been to where I am today. So every experience that I've had you would not have necessarily predicted that it would have followed from the thing that I did immediately before. But in the whole, it all works together to give me the firm foundation upon which I stand today as I try and build this company.
Fantastic. Great answer. Thank you so much. Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking
Thank
to you.
you as well
for taking the time. And I look forward to following your success. Have a wonderful weekend. Are you mountains in Colorado, or do you have some amount of sweltering like?
No, it's not. Well, it can be sweltering, but dry heat. So we don't get sweltering until we're like close to 100 because it's really dry. So it's quite comfortable.
Oh, lovely. Okay. Lovely, comfortable weekend. I have a horrible feeling it's going to be a bit sweltering here for the weekend, but
there you go. We'll be I'm British. I'll be complaining again when it's cold. So it's just what we do. But
All right.
Whatever you do, enjoy. And,
thank you.
And hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Thanks, Sharon. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure.
Take
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. She Leads Biotech is brought to you by CNA International USA, a woman-owned boutique search firm based in New York. If you're looking to hire talent for your company or want support in achieving your career goals, please reach out to me at contact@cnaint.com. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And remember, the success of every woman should be an inspiration to another. So don't be afraid to share yours. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.